So we are talking about the movie, The Purgation. Now this one is written and directed by Kieu and stars Tiffany, Kieu, Kat Johnson. So the story here basically focuses on a young woman as she has had a career in LA doing some kind of film production, and she decides that she's going to return to a sleepy country town of Black Falls where she grew up. Now at the beginning of the movie we see her as a young girl with a couple of friends, and they decide to do some kind of amateur horror film in this abandoned asylum. And of course things go wrong, spooky stuff starts to happen. And obviously everyone's scarred from it in one way or another. Kind of starts a little bit like Stephen King's It, where we have that child portion of the movie. Then we see it later on in adult life. But I've got to say the transition is quite bad because you don't realise it's an actual way, a time jump, so to speak. But anyway, and obviously she comes back to this town, and obviously stuff starts to get a bit weird. Is she being haunted by the kind of ghosts of her past? Is she going mad? Are you just watching her descent into madness, or are you becoming mad whilst watching this confusing and convoluted movie? So let's talk about the positives and negatives of The Purgation. How the hell would you even say that anyway? That's a weird title. Don't even know if that's a real word. I should really Google that, but I'm not going to. Anyway, let's talk about the negatives of this film. As you can probably guess, I wasn't a huge fan of this film. The main issue with this film for me is simply the way it's put together. This film, is just a confusing and convoluted story that just seems to veer from one direction as place to another. It's almost like just a whole bunch of scenes that have kind of been shot without any real kind of cohesive story that are just kind of shoved together to try and make some kind of story out of it. That's what it comes across like, unfortunately. It's a shame because I think there is some talent here. There are some sort of creepy sequences and stuff like that, and the idea of it, I suppose, isn't too bad. But the execution, sadly, is poorly lacking. I do think this film needed a guiding hand, maybe from a producer or something, to really kind of keep us a little bit more focused, because it's just all over the place, unfortunately. Sometimes it does it on purpose. It has a few kind of like misdirects in it, but unfortunately the fact that the storytelling is quite poor to begin with, it just makes it even more confusing. So you just don't know what you're watching half the time. The editing of this film is terrible. There's some terrible editing. The transitions between scenes, and then some things just don't make sense. You'll see one person do something in one scene, and then the next scene they're in it's like ages later. They're in a completely different place. And what the hell's going on? It doesn't make sense. I won't give you spoilers, but especially the beginning half of this movie. The editing is absolutely terrible. Let's talk about the acting. The acting, I have to say, not particularly great, especially from the child actors, unfortunately. And that's the first 20 minutes or so of this film. So when you're kind of watching that, you're already on a kind of like a bad footing. When you've seen things like Stranger Things, which obviously focus on a group of kids dealing with the kind of a supernatural element, and then we have this. It's like, oh man, it's really jarring because it's so poor. We cut to the later sort of time frame, and the editing's a little better, but nonetheless, it's not particularly engaging. We look at some of the positives here. I do think some of the art direction is quite good. I think the set design is quite good. When we have the sort of scenes that are in this kind of this asylum, there are some creepy moments, and there are some sort of like some clever ideas for the supernatural stuff here and there, and there's some interesting kind of story ideas, but it's just so sort of poorly put together, unfortunately. So I feel this film just feels slapped together, doesn't make a lot of sense, and some of it's intentional and some of it unfortunately isn't, but when you watch it as a whole, it just becomes across as a right convoluted mess. Couple of interesting ideas, couple of sort of scary themes here and there, some interesting touches here and there, but overall as a film, when you watch this, I'm afraid it doesn't become particularly entertaining, and it's kind of hard to follow with characters you don't particularly care about or really understand their motivations for. So overall, I'm going to give this movie a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.